we obviously have 4 weeks. And as Connie mentioned, I'll speak tonight. Connie, are we okay? Connie is going to do her slideshow and a talk with it next week. And then the 3rd week, Lahari will speak on really focusing on karma and reincarnation. But as you'll hear, there's just no way for me to begin this series without doing. I was saying to everybody earlier in the evening that there are many things that you'll hear in the course of this class that you've heard before. I've often sat on Sundays and wondered to myself whether I'm listening or I'm speaking, how often do we actually hear anything brand new? You know, the spiritual life is actually rather simple. The teachings are simple. They're not always easy to manifest or to live with, but I think what changes is us, so that each time we hear these things, we get to go a little deeper with it or have a realization that we didn't have before. And, you know, I look around, there are many of you here who I'm not going to say anything new to you tonight, but it's everything that we talk about, and Connie said this when she talked about her slideshow earlier, and she said as she's been putting it together, that she realized that every aspect of our spiritual path, of any spiritual path really, is touched on with this topic of death, dying, karma, reincarnation. When Jeffrey was talking earlier about his father dying, Jeffrey mentioned that his father died suddenly in a plane crash when he was 6 years old. And he just left home and didn't come back one day. And I'll just share with you my experience. My father, who I was really very close with, I was sort of born into what was a fairly dysfunctional family. There would be some worse names for it these days, but there you have it. It was my karmic joy to come into that family. But my father was an incredibly dear soul, really loved by all. And he and I were very great friends. You know, I had this experience of being the second child at a time where the older child was the child that was born when all of the men were away at war. So the women got pregnant, and then the men left. And so my sister, my husband at this point, I mean, so many people that I know, they didn't even meet their fathers till they were 3 or 4 years old. And then the second child was born, which was me or whoever it was. And so the father didn't know that first child at all, and in fact came back from the war. In many instances, a very common thing, actually really traumatized. And then everybody's attention was on this little child that he didn't even know. And then somebody like me came along, or whoever the second child was. And so my father and I were extremely close. He was a dear friend. And one night he went out to play some cards with his friends, and he was 38 years old, and he just didn't come home. He had a massive heart attack, and he died that night. And so I wasn't 6 months old, and we were very close, but I had just turned 14. It was a huge loss in my life, huge. So I could relate, Jeffrey, it looks a little different. It is different for a 6-month-old. It's different karma, but it's still that feeling of, you know, now you see him, now you don't. Now you have that safety, now you don't. And it was never talked about, because people did not talk about death or dying in those days. They just did not. And if they mentioned anything about it, if I remember hearing this, oh, the kids will be fine, they're just kids, they'll be okay. And I mean, I was not fine for a long time. I really missed my father. Somebody mentioned, and I can't remember who now, for 2 years after my father died, every time the doorbell would ring or somebody would knock, it wasn't a wish. It was a, oh, that's Dad. And then I'd have to readjust. So it was very traumatic, and there were many stories like this, but people did not talk about death and dying in this country. And it's just, I mean, Jeffrey said it, it was a moment frozen in time. People had cancer, and you watched them, and I mean, I'm old enough, and I'm looking around, I don't honestly know who else is old enough. Sarah might be, but otherwise, you know, to really remember some of the ways people left, and it was never mentioned. They were just there. As a physician, even when I first started, you know, and I'm old, but I'm not ancient, And I remember I didn't start medical school till I was 32. So we're talking about 36 years ago. You didn't give people their diagnoses. It was just not discussed. It's hard to imagine, but you see, 36 years, 40 years, not that long ago. And then many of you have heard me tell this story, but it's very relevant to how we hold death and dying and what it means. Because everybody in this room is not that far removed from it. Culturally, it may be different, East and West, but I don't know the answer to that. I do know that death is seen as a much more natural part of life in the East, but I have no idea how much it's talked about. But it wasn't until Elisabeth Kubler-Ross, a German physician, came to this country. She was a psychiatrist and decided that it was crazy the way nobody was talking about death or dying, the whole process. She was walking around hospitals and it was not being discussed. And many of you have heard me tell this really delightful story that she went up to a cleaning woman in the hospital where she worked. And she said to her, you know, I'm about to start a hospital specifically for people who are dying. They have diseases that we know we cannot treat. And I'd like you to come and work with me. And the woman said, I'm a cleaning lady. And Elisabeth Kubler-Ross said to her, no, you're not. I've watched you for years. You are somebody who stops in every room, who says to people, how are you? Who listens to the answer. She said, you will have more to give these people than anybody who's been trained in any way. And so this woman, who became the major administrator of this hospital over time, went with Elisabeth Kubler-Ross, and basically they started what became hospice. They didn't call it that at all. So that is one part of this whole story, is how at least many of us grew up with the concept of death, which was, it's not spoken about, it's not shared, it's too traumatic, and that's in us. I mean, even if some of you are a generation behind that, now again, there are cultural differences. But the other aspect of this is that there is no way to make sense in any way of death and dying unless you believe in something bigger, something other, something more than what you see is what you get. Because if that's all you can believe in, it's just only horrible. It's just terrible that you're dying. You all know I was born and raised Jewish. I've talked about that a lot. And Jews really do not like the notion of death, particularly traditional Jewish people. They don't talk about it. And when they die, it is an awful thing in the house because they have, I mean, I lived amongst this for the whole first half of my life. There's nothing for them to grab onto. What are you doing? You're just sick, you're just suffering, and then you leave. I'm talking a lot about the downside right now. I promise you I'm not going to stay here, but I think we have to really understand there's two aspects of wanting to explore the whole death and dying thing, the concept and process and what we can learn from it. One is there is so much more to life than what we see. That what we see is not only, we can't even say it's the smallest piece of it, we're looking at it through eyes that are deluded. We're examining the world and what's around us from a sense perspective much of the time. Even, we were talking about attachments earlier, even when we're trying very hard not to. Those of us who are here who are committed on a spiritual path, not just in this class, but looking to grow into what is more, what is the true nature of life. It is so hard for us to imagine that what we're seeing, feeling, touching, hearing isn't the truth. I mean, those words don't even really begin to make sense. We can't make that make sense through words, through logic. We have to find some other way, which is, I hope, what I'll be able to do a little bit of tonight. So that's one thing, is beginning to understand. I had a quote here that I wanted to read to you. And I don't even know who this man is. Maybe somebody else knows him. His name is Leadbeater, Leadbeater. But anyway, I have this in my, I don't know who he is. but he said, "It is the commonest of mistakes to consider that the limit of our power of perception is also the limit of all there is to perceive." It's absolutely, and it makes perfect sense, but when you really try and limit, we think that what we perceive is what there is. And again, we're the small, as I often say in talks and in sermons, the Gita says, "Out of 1,000, one will seek me." And just by virtue of the fact that we're here, we are that 1 in 1,000. The Gita also goes on to say, "And out of 1,000 who seek me, one will find me." We don't know. That's probably still up in the air for a lot of us, but I think we're at least seekers. So we are the people who are really out there searching. We're in a part of an extraordinary minority. But the whole notion that there is something else that we cannot begin to imagine. This is why I said it to Jeffrey, but I said it out loud before. Jeffrey said, I'm repeating this for those of you who were not here, when his father died, he said he examined that for a long time, but then he finally realized he just had to let it be. He had to really just accept it. And I said to him, good for you, whether you knew it or not, because there is everything that's important to us in life as spiritual seekers. Everything that really matters, not, again, the material things that we have, not even our physical health in that way, but everything that really matters that's about the soul and the soul's journey and what it means to live and die and live and die and to go through these cycles is absolutely inexplicable from any logical perspective. I said it before, but I want to say it again. You can never solve a spiritual dilemma, problem, scenario with the rational, logical mind. It simply can't happen. I was reminded, I don't know why, but for some reason the other day, last year at Spiritual Renewal Week, there was a talk given by a man whose name is Purushottama, and he's writing a book called, I think it's actually about to be published, called The Physics of God. So here's a man who's been with Ananda for years, deeply devoted to Yogananda, and a scientist, really knows a lot about physics. And he was giving this remarkable talk. Most of us couldn't follow it, but we got the gist of it. And he was talking about leptons and quarks and just how much smaller and smaller and smaller this particle of energy has gotten that the quantum physicists are now realizing is what life is all about. They're realizing every single aspect of life, right? Energy, everything is energy, which can neither be created nor destroyed. It's no longer neutrinos. Neutrinos look huge now in comparison to quarks and leptons, and maybe I'm even 5 years outdated with that, I don't know, but something like that. I got up the next day to give a talk at Spiritual Renewal Week, and Puru was sitting about as close to me as Pam is, up at the village, and I said, you know, Puru, you're going to have to pardon me for a minute, but no matter how small that particle is that we're talking about, no matter how much closer the quantum physicists are coming to understanding that everything's energy, and even, I've quoted that physicist who said in this documentary once, we're beginning to think this is God, meaning that energy. But I said, it's a chasm that exists between us. It's still a scientific principle that they're trying to solve with the logical mind. And it could be 3,000 miles wide, or it could be a quark wide, or a lepton wide. It doesn't matter. You can't get from here to there. Are you with me? With the logical mind, you cannot make sense of what we're trying to talk about: death, dying, karma, reincarnation. What does start allowing us to believe in it is when we start seeing miracles. When we start having a moment where our mother's dying, we're not really conscious, we don't really know what to ask for or to look for, but suddenly grace descends. Suddenly things happen in the room. Suddenly, as Karen was saying to us, it's inexplicable, because that's how so much of this path is. I was listening to Connie, who was talking tonight about every time somebody in her family has died, she said, but for this moment was I born, knowing, because she could just connect with her brother when enough of what was physically real to him was just leaving. He didn't have it energetically to keep that together. He wasn't thinking like this, but that's what happened to this big, strong workman. The world as he knew it was leaving, and he was being pulled into another reality, and he and Connie could then connect. And when my sister died, I don't know how many people I've been with when they've died, by the way, but it's a very big number. Both, as I said, because of who I am professionally. I was ICU and CCU nurse in some of the first intensive care units and coronary care units. Then I was an emergency room nurse. That's where a lot of the people die. And then I was am a physician, of course. But there's something beyond that. I've been on planes where people have died. I drive down the road more often than not, car crashes. Always, is there a doctor? Is there a doctor? It's just been a remarkable karma for me. The number of people who die consciously is a small percentage of the number of people who pass. And when my sister was dying, my sister and I were very, very deeply connected. Not in a good way, in an easy, loving way, no, but our connection was extraordinary. We were just deeply wrapped up with each other, and now I've realized, I didn't know it then, though I never left the relationship, that life doesn't look like how we think it should look. Loving, deep, oh my God, you're the best, the most wonderful sister. There was a connection there that it didn't matter whether it was hard or easy. Karmically, we had so much to do with each other. And when she was dying, and I stayed with her, literally stayed in the bed with her for the last weeks of her life, we would both travel to this place. I didn't know anything about it at the time. I didn't even understand. I had no understanding, which was probably the gift of it, what was going on. We would get out there, and we were both having the same experience. And wordlessly, this just happened. It's just like what Karen was saying. I couldn't have created this in a million years. I would say to her, telepathically almost, isn't it beautiful? And she would say to me, it's so beautiful. Can you come with me? And I would say to her, no, Gwen, I'm not supposed to come. And then I'd say, but look where you're going. And she would say, I know, it's really nice, but I really do want you to come with me. It was so sweet. This is days before she died. It was just, and then she'd wake up and she'd say, make sure you buy me, are you going to go out today and buy a lottery ticket? And if I win, I want you to have the money. That's her consciousness where she lived. I mean, not a bad consciousness if you want to just keep trying for the lottery and leave it to your sister. But when she got far enough away from what was happening, then it was a different world. And again, I know many of you have heard these stories, but if there's one thing I learned from Swami Kriyananda, it's just that there are stories worth retelling. And I'm telling them to you because I would like us all to be on the level of we are not in control in this life the way we think we are. There are our biggest reality. What is really happening is something that we know nothing about. But these things happen, and they're real. And I was just saying to Karen today, I used to not want to tell any of these stories because it's so easy for people to think I'm just talking about myself. But the way I'm talking about myself is by saying, until I walked onto this path when I was 32 years old, I didn't know any of this. You have to understand, I was walking on the beach below Yogananda's Encinitas Hermitage, my husband and I running, making fun of Self-Realization Fellowship. Oh yeah, those people think they know everything about how the mind and body work together. We would say, I can only say it out loud because I know Master knows. It's embarrassing. That's who I was. I thought I was really a big deal because my husband and I understood that the mind and body interacted. This is my first husband who died many years ago now. Because in medicine, nobody else knew that the mind and the body had an influence on each other. So we were like in the next realm. But my God, it was nothing until I watched Swami Satchitananda get up over the weekend that changed my life and stood up in front of a crowd of 5,000 people and I've never seen a Swami. He was in orange robes and this big white beard. A lot of you know him. Quintessential Swami. He was it. He just looked, and he was it. He felt it. He was joy, just joy moving around. And he spoke, just like I'm speaking, to a crowd of 5,000, and every one of us heard him just like you're hearing me. And I said to my husband, what's going on here? No mic, no nothing. He just spoke to each of us, and we heard him. And it was that day that I turned to my husband and said, I have no idea what these words mean. I don't know what I'm talking about, but my life will be different now than I ever thought it was going to be. I was 32. Before that, I didn't know anything. But you all know that, or many of you know, that I heard Master tell me to go to medical school. And I know a lot of you have heard this. I'm not going to tell the whole story. I was on Swami's Beach. Just last year, I went back there for the first time in years. Very powerful. And he told me, you're going to go to medical school and you're going to go to an Ivy League school. Now, here's what I want to tell you, why I'm telling you this story. I knew nothing. I was arrogant. I was egotistical. Swami Kriyananda told us at dinner one night, my husband, I've been married to 2 Barrys, but this is Barry number 1 I'm talking about now. Barry and I were sitting at the table with him, and in front of 20-some people, Swamiji said, Shanti and Barry are just so self-centered. They're so much about ego. He just said, absolutely appropriate of nothing to this whole room full of people. When they get over it, they'll be much better off. And then everybody just went on eating. And the miracle of that story is that I didn't feel terrible about it. Now, why would I not? I was arrogant. You would have thought I would have felt terrible, but somehow my whole being knew it was true. I'm saying this to you so that you get who I was, because this is not about Shanti. This is about reality. Okay, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. I went home. I told my husband, guess what? I heard it's the truth. It feels like the truth. I'm going to medical school, and it's got to be an Ivy League school. And literally, without a beat's pause, he said, okay, what do we do? That was it. So I applied to all these schools, Harvard, Yale, Duke, Stanford. You all know I went to Stanford Medical School. 3 weeks before graduation, the dean comes and tells me they can't find my undergraduate degree. I said to him, I don't have an undergraduate degree. Now, I didn't. I never graduated from college. And he said, well, we have a problem. We can't. He was incredulous, I swear to you. We can't give somebody a medical degree without an undergraduate degree. So I said to him, look, John, just like this, he was a friend. I mean, I was 10 years older than everybody there, and we'd gotten to be good friends. I said, first of all, you're in good company because I was accepted at a lot of other great schools. Second of all, you do have a problem because I'm graduating. Now, I did graduate. Of course, they gave me an honorary undergraduate degree. But it's the truth. A degree of Bachelor of Medical Sciences, it doesn't exist. There is no such thing at Stanford University. Here's why I'm telling you. I know. You know what's funny about it? Is you got to look at these guys and just love how it works. So here's the moral of the story. Listen, guys, I have pages of some of these stories. Literally, they're really fascinating. Why are they fascinating? Who in this country has ever heard of getting into any graduate school without an undergraduate degree? You can't do that. They make movies out of con artists who do this. Literally, people who go to law school, medical school, who never, or become doctors or lawyers, they never went to school. This was a story of divine intervention with the Red Seas parting, just like it, no different. And here I am, a licensed physician. I never went to college. I didn't go to college. You know, I know, I feel the same way. People say to me, what did you write on your application? I just can't remember. It's like it was blacked out for all of us. You know that story when Master had the, one of the monks was hitchhiking, and Master always said, don't hitchhike. It's dangerous, I do not want you. And this guy hitchhiked, and he gets out of the car, and these people who are driving send him, you go to that house and knock on the door. He knocks and knocks and knocks, nobody answers. The next day, they drive him down the road. He goes back because nobody will answer the door. They were going to rob these people, I guess. They drop him off on this old dark road. This is a true story. He finds his way back to Master, to the Hermitage, wherever he was staying. I don't know if it was Mount Washington or Encinitas. And the next morning, Master comes up to him and says, "Haven't I told you not to hitchhike?" He didn't say a word to Master. He said, "I had to turn off the ears of the people in that house to save you." That's who they are. That's the level of what we're dealing with. This woman needs to go to medical school. Why? Who knows why? Probably because I've had to stand up in front of thousands, if not tens of thousands of people and talk about things that people wouldn't believe, except I'm a Stanford physician. And people just believe anything you say because you're a Stanford physician. I think Master really knew. Now, I think he knew. Of course he knew. That's why he said an Ivy League school. This is what they do. This is how unreal this life is. People traveling, grace descending, doors opening to medical schools. This is impossible. What happened was impossible, but not when we move and we live in this other realm. Not when we realize that we have so little understanding of what's really happening in our lives, that these bodies are not what they seem. That I with my own eyes have watched people do psychic surgery. With my own eyes, stood there and watched. There used to be a woman who would come to Redwood City. She worked with the migrant farmers down on the coast for most of the year, but 2 months out of the year she would come to Redwood City, a Filipino woman, her and her husband. These are just true stories. Somehow Barry number one and I heard about her. So we used to go whenever we would hear she was coming. We loved her. And that woman would just reach into somebody's stomach. You would see her hand disappear. Can you imagine? I almost thought I was going to pass out the first time. You just think that you're hallucinating, except you're not. You see it over and over and over. I remember going to India one time with a man who was my teacher for many years. His name was Sankeshava Das. And I went to India many times with him. We would go for 2-3 months a year. And I don't know how many years, but a lot meaning not that many, but like 7 or 8 years in a row I did it. And I was very close with him, and very close. I used to sleep on the floor beside his bed and have all of my meals with him. He was really a great gift in my life. And one day on about the 3rd trip, he said to me, "Shanti Ma, come here, I want to tell you something." He said, "We're about to go to the place where I used to meet my guru all the time." He said, "When I go here," well, we were traveling with the whole group. He always took a group back to India, and that's when I would go. Then the group would leave, and I would stay. He said to me, "I can't help it. Here's what happens." He said, "You'll see me." He said, "I'll fall to the floor." And he would say to me, he'd come up, he had these cherubic little eyes, "Shanti Ma, I'm telling you because you love me and you're a doctor." That's what he would say to me. I mean, so sweet. And he said, "I'm going to fall on the floor and I'm going to look like I'm dead." That's what he said. "If you check my pulse or my breathing, there will be no pulse and I won't be breathing." He said to me, "Don't be scared." I said to him, "Guruji, my whole life I've been taught to pounce on people when that happens." He says to me, no pouncing. He said, "I'll be in samadhi, basically, and you'll think I'm dead, but I don't want you to get frightened." And then every time we went back to that spot, that's what happened. He would just immediately go to the ground, leave his body, and we would sit there with him. And no pulse, no breath. Well, you start seeing these things enough. And you start realizing something else is going on here. There's a lot going on. And as I said, I've said to a lot of you many times, I should just tell stories because that's just been a part of my karma. One night, just tell stories. So let me get back to our topic now, but I wanted to share enough. And I imagine if this was an open mic thing, that each of you would have some of these stories. That's what I'm imagining. We heard some of them earlier, and we'll hear more as the weeks go by, because some of these things Again, every one of the stories that we heard, we can't explain them. Of this whole death, dying, loss, if you're going to think about it with your mind, then either it'll make no sense or it will be terribly sad. And if we can get beyond that, then we can move to this place where we can see the extraordinary joy of what happens as we live and as we die, and as we live again and as we die again. And who was it who said, Lahari was saying that it was one of Jesus' disciples, and I can't remember who, you didn't come up with it, maybe you will now, who said, I die daily, meaning I leave my body. I move into samadhi, just like what happened with Sankeshava Das and me. I die daily. So I was thinking, we talk about this death and dying, and we're talking about the final exam, which we brought up earlier, and how do we start preparing? And I promised you the last class that I will bring you all of Swamiji's suggestions. But what I want to say is that we could think of this with every Kriya breath. How many people in this room are Kriya Bonds? Good, a lot of you. But even if you're not, Kriya meditation is a type of meditation, Ellen, that we teach here. It's a specific technique that people go through a lot for about a year or so, and then we initiate them into this very particular type of meditation, which is known to be a very high form of meditation that can help our souls evolve quickly. So I just say that to you. But even if you're not, even if you're doing Hung Sa, even if you're doing any type of meditation, but I will say at the end of every upward breath, even if you're practicing Hung Sa, where you bring your breath in through the medulla up to the point between the eyebrows, and you pause, even that pause can be a moment of leaving and rebirth, leaving and rebirth. You know, when I left Ananda for these years, I just physically left. I was spiritually nowhere. I think Sankeshava Das and Master were in cahoots, so they both helped me. But with the year I came back and moved into the community, I was up at SRW. I hadn't been there for a while. And they were talking, some people who knew me from the past were talking about whether I should take higher Kriya or not. And Asha had a lot of questions. And again, this is years ago. She said, look, you're just back. Maybe you're confused. I don't know. She was saying, I don't know. We haven't had a chance to talk. You've had this other teacher. So I just said right away, let's just let it go. I have my first Kriya, and then there's second, third, and fourth Kriyas. They're just all different techniques. But I said to her, there is no reason for me to have any argument or question or concern about it, because if I could do one round of Kriya, one Hung Sa perfectly, meaning right in my spine, attention right where it needs to be coming up, I said I'd be free. We don't need more techniques. We need any one technique to take us there. So, where is the there? That is the question. So many of you, at least I keep saying you all, and it's not true, but many of you have heard me speak about this whole thing with energy. Energy neither being created nor destroyed, but just, so literally not created or destroyed, but transformed, meaning it takes on different forms. It sounds so simple every time I say it, but it is the essence of death, dying, karma, and reincarnation. Absolutely the essence, because what we are made of are really these very subtle energy bodies. That's who we actually are. This is the soul that has been separated, as we talk about, this individual, what's called a jiva, but it's an individual part of the vast essence of all that is. It comes out here for a little journey. We call it life, but it's just a moment in the life, and then it comes back and it moves into a more energetic state, and then when it's time, it can find another vehicle to travel in, which happens to be bodies for human beings. Well, it's bodies for dogs and deers and whatever animals, but it could be in the form of rocks or minerals or whatever, wherever it is in its stage. And each time, we're just getting a little closer to remembering our true nature, to remembering that we are divine beings. But what happens? That soul comes into this body at the instant of conception, the very instant the sperm and ovum unite, literally simultaneously. That soul goes, that's my next life. And it is born into this being. Here's the problem. Master says the soul identified with the body is the ego. So the ego is not something horrible. It's part of our soul nature. Unfortunately, from the instant of conception, it gets turned around and so confused. It's suddenly, instead of looking up and around to all it is, it's looking down, wow, look at this body I get to go into. And it starts by forming the medulla and then the whole nervous system, but it doesn't matter. It's already looking 180 degrees in the wrong direction. It's a really interesting thing. It happens. It's not horrible. It's nobody's fault. It's the nature of the soul's journey. But from then on, we get left, those of us who are in this room, with trying really to do all we can to turn ourselves back 180 degrees and go, I don't want to just be this body. I don't want to be this small experience. I want to remember who I am. Like Evelyn's grandmother could at the moment, or those moments before that she was passing. She knew she wasn't confused. That's where I want to go. The soul's tugging on us. You know, there's a really interesting story, and I think it actually is in that chapter. It's not a chapter, it's an essay that Swami wrote called The Final Exam, where there was a woman who she lived this life. She was really into rock and roll. She liked a lot of dark music, not just rock and roll, but acid rock, that kind of stuff. Things that kind of vibration, I should say, that would bring her into her lower chakras. She did not live a very elevated life, but she was particularly into music. And when she died, she had a near-death experience. I don't know why they call it near-death. She died. And she descended into this very dark place. And it was very painful for her. And she was looking around, and she saw all of these other beings who were totally engrossed in darkness and in some of the music, clearly living out of their very lower chakras. And when she came back, she said, it was very interesting because in a moment, I mean, she was literally freaked. You know, she was in a different state, but she was just blown away by how awful this place was that she went. This is a true story, by the way. And she happened to look up, and she saw a shaft of light. And in that light, she saw beings, angels, I think she described them, that were trying to reach down and help these souls. But she said, in this place, everybody was just looking down. And they didn't look up. She was the only one who looked up and saw the light. And once she saw the light, in this, what we now call near-death experience, then as soon as she turned her attention in the right direction, then these beings of light could reach down and help her out. But she said she couldn't make anybody else look up. People just wanted, they weren't quite people, but these beings just wanted to keep looking down. And when she lived to tell all this, of course, and she dedicated her life to walking around and saying to people, and this is why this story came to mind, don't get unconscious about anything that you're doing, nothing in life. Every sound that you hear, because it's energy, every bit of food that you take in, because it's energy, every color that you wear. We talk a lot about this in the chakra class, but it is really important when we talk about death and dying. There is no room to be unconscious because that jiva, that bit of spirit, of soul that is us, I've recently started to say it's like the most exquisitely sensitive memory foam. You know these memory foam beds, you get into them and that's what this is like. every single thought, and this is not to scare anyone, because I'll tell you why it's not to scare you in a minute, but it is simply the truth that every thought we have, every piece of clothing we put on, every friend that we make, every restaurant that we sit in, no matter what the vibration, every single decision, thought, feeling that we have in this life gets registered in this subtle energy that just is our astral spine. So you can't sit and think bad thoughts about somebody and think that because you didn't say it out loud, it's not having an effect. It's having a profound effect on them and on you. And it's getting registered. And it is part of, this is what we'll talk about as these classes unfold, what becomes our karma, what becomes why we choose the next ova and sperm that we choose to come into. Because we have these accumulated tendencies now in the form of energy. We are that. And so because our soul wants to work it out and remember who it is, its divine nature, we keep coming in over and over, very specifically, to have exactly the experiences we need to grow. There is never a mistake about this. This is what is so painful for people when they imagine God to be something other than us. And they want to say, how can I believe in God that would have me be born into a family where my father was an abusive alcoholic? Why would anybody do that to a little baby? But nobody's doing anything to the little baby. First of all, the little baby's a big grown-up soul, just happens to be in a little body. But it is coming in to do what it needs to do. We could also say, wow, look at this opportunity that I have. Of course, most of us don't come in that consciously. Somebody like Master does, and hopefully we get there. For those of you who were at my sermon this Sunday, and I just, I never remember exactly what I say. I mean, because it just starts coming out. I know what I'd like to say before I get there. But one of the things that came to me when I just went through this very challenging, I'm so much better now. I'm even actually able to talk with my hands again, which I'm up here celebrating. I'm holding my arm here, but I'm able to express myself the way I like to. I went through a really, really hard, 6-week period. You all know I had the surgery, but I got quite ill in the middle of it with a medical issue, and I was sick. And I was sitting there, and I was saying to myself, and then I was telling my husband, and then I was telling people who had come, as if it was a revelation. It was. It was one of those moments where I got something in a way that I hadn't gotten it ever before. That when we allow ourselves to be unconscious, which, of course, we all do. We'd like not to, but we do. It is so easy to start sliding down. Here we are, the people who are the 1 in 1,000. We don't want that to happen. But I will tell you, and I've been consciously, thoughtfully on a path, meditating almost every day of my life. I mean, now I could say really almost every day, except when I was just horribly sick, but as a rule. And even early on, most days, 40 years. That's not a lot of time as we're talking about all these lives, but it's the better part of one lifetime. That's been my effort, my focus, my desire. And I could just watch myself getting negative and feeling sorry for myself and beginning to let those demons in where you think, I'm never going to feel good again. I know it. I will never be out of pain. Oh my God, what am I going to do living with all this pain? And what's going on in my stomach? I can't stand this. What if it never feels normal again? I didn't eat for 2.5 weeks. Doesn't sound like a long time. I couldn't bear the thought of food. I lost just overnight 10% of my body weight. I was weak. I felt terrible. And I'm saying, what if I can never eat a normal meal again? What if I never can go to the bathroom regularly? I was there. And then I go, wait a minute. What are you doing? And I remember writing a couple of friends, and I said, these demons, they're just waiting. They are waiting. It's right there. It's so easy. With enormous effort, and I know I said this on Sunday, but I want to say it again. I would say, to myself, you're not going here, you're not staying here. And I saw, here I am one of the people who want this, and I thought, boy, it takes courage, commitment, conviction to keep going in the right direction. It just simply does. I was humbled, and I learned something. And I knew even in the minute, I said to Barry number 2, I said to him, you know, all my life, I've been given all these one-time experiences, one bladder infection, one this, one that, because it makes you so much more empathic. You get inside of other beings when you're trying to help people and you go, oh, that's what it feels like. You may not be having the person having the heart attack, but if you've ever had a bladder infection, you do not want to sit in a doctor's waiting room for too long. They're miserable. They're miserable. I had one. Okay, never forget it. And I was saying to myself, you learn everything you can learn, Shanti, so that you can care about others more deeply, so that you can be more compassionate, more empathic. But I'm saying it to you now to say, every experience that we have, it's because we need it. There's never, ever a mistake. And if we can tell ourselves that, nobody's doing anything to us. We are calling these experiences to ourselves so that when we come back next time, we're a little more evolved. We remember a little earlier. We find our love for God. We find God in others a little sooner, because we will keep coming and going. That's what we're meant to do. That is the soul's long journey. And that is the death. I'm just going to say this, then I'm going to stop. I realize I'm all over these 4 categories, but again, I have to be. But there are things about death, actually, that I'll say to you as the weeks go. But that's why we were saying earlier, and this would be the take-home message from tonight, and that is, we cannot be fooled by what we see on the physical plane. We can't think, even at the moment of death, because some people may look beautiful when they die. Many people do not. Connie said it, and I want to repeat it. Death can be very ugly. The body has contractions and distortions, and depending on who's leaving, they may be fighting more or less. Some people just don't want to leave, and they are holding on for everything. It's not pretty, but we have to say to ourselves over and over about ourselves and about them, this has nothing to do in this way that it's looking to us. It has everything to do with what the soul needs, but it doesn't mean that the soul is suffering. You know, when my first husband died, and I was with him, and I had pretty much lived with him the last year of his life, even though we were separated. He was married, and his wife and I really lived through that last year. Excuse me. And Barry was huge. He was this big man, like 6'2" maybe, but a sizable man, not heavy, but just big. And he had a huge personality. He just walked into a room and filled it. And, you know, and he was a worldwide speaker and teacher, and I mean, he did good things with his energy, and he was always, we were on a spiritual path together. We went to India all those times together. We woke up every morning of our lives chanting, meditating. He did not want to leave his body. This man was not leaving. He just couldn't imagine the world without him in it. And it was the most painful death I've ever seen. But I think the point is, we all have to hold that. What we're seeing, the physical reality that we're seeing, it's only that. It only exists on this plane. It's only a vibration. It's not real. What we need to do is look beyond it and say, what is going on at the soul level? Because that's really what death is about. Death is really about freeing the soul. I remember when my mother died, I wish I had brought this with me. Somebody sent me this poem that talked about death being like a ship. I wish I could get it right because it was so poetic. And they said, you know, when you're on this shore and the ship leaves and you go, there she goes, and you watch the ship leaving and it reaches the horizon. But then the poet said, and just as the ship crosses the horizon and you can no longer see it, somebody on the other side is saying, oh, here comes the ship, and it's coming in. And it was said much more beautifully than I'm saying it, but I hope you can hear it. It's, Swamiji, Master, always saying, nothing happens when you die. Nothing happens. This body goes. This body's nothing. It's a moment of that energy in a particular form. Nothing happens to the soul. That's why Tushti kept saying, I want to die consciously. I want to die consciously. I want to be living this from my soul's perspective of just moving on, of nothing more happening than taking off a set of clothes at night, picking up the next morning, putting on another one. That's the analogy we always use. But I have come to believe, after watching it, seeing it over and over, meditating on it, these stories that I could tell you, that I've been telling you, that are these miracles. I believe what these masters are telling us. There's a part of me that knows it to be true. Nothing happens. There is nothing to be afraid of. Once you're on that other side, you have no idea. I know it's getting a little late. We have a little ceremony we want to do, but I want to share one more story. I'm sorry. When I first moved up here to go to medical school, and that was another thing, somebody walked up to me in a bookstore in San Diego where we lived, a stranger, right up to me. First thing you have to do when you get up to, and I hear you saying you're moving to Palo Alto. I said, yeah. First thing you do when you get up there, he said, you go to East West Bookstore at Menlo Park. Just like that. Total stranger, never saw him again. I swear to you, it's the truth. So my husband and I come up here, we empty our moving van. I swear to you, we rented a house in Palo Alto. As soon as the truck was empty, we went to East West Bookstore. It was like the word of God. And I walked in there that next day, and that, of course, was the beginning of the rest of this life, and it's been fabulous. But the book I bought that day was a book that was written by an English constable, and it's been out of print for years. I used to buy it and give it to a lot of people. And this man was an avowed atheist. He was British and an atheist, and he didn't believe anything in God or spirit. And he was on a vacation with his son and their whole family at the beach, at the shore in England. And he was driving home, and he was in one car with his wife, and right in front of him was his son, daughter-in-law, and their two little kids. And they were in a head-on collision and instantly killed, right in front of him. And about 6 months later, this man was grieving. This book, reading the beginning of this book was just excruciating. Somebody knocked on the door. And they said, I'm here for, and they mentioned his son. And the man said, I'm sorry, my son's been dead for 6 months. And it was a woman. And she said, I know, I have a message for you from him. And he just became enraged. And he just started, I don't know what you're trying to do. This is brutal. Get out of my life. And he said he just couldn't rid himself. She said, I'll leave, but just keep my card. He wouldn't even accept it. She put it down on the doorstep. About 6 months later, he picked up her card and called her because he could not get out of his pain. And he started seeing her. And this woman first told him things about his son that nobody else could tell him. Nobody. But here's why I'm telling this story for a lot of reasons. But he said, the first message that she gave me, and they met for years then. This man, talk about being transformed. She said, what he wants me to tell you, first of all, is, Dad, even before the accident happened, I was out of my body. I watched it happen. I so wanted to come and comfort you and Mom. And she described what the accident looked like, every bit of it. And he said to him, but I want you to know, I felt nothing but joy. I have never experienced a bit of pain. I would ask you, if you love me, as you've been saying in all of your mourning for the last year, celebrate this with me. I am in a place of exquisite freedom, expansion. He used these words. This was very new to me. This was 1979, really very new. But it was, an autobiographical thing. Very powerful story, isn't it? You just hear these things. That's what death is. That's what it is. It's a freeing of the soul. It's a letting go. It's like keeping compressed air like this, and then you open up the container, and the air can just fill up almost any space. And that's just exactly what this process is. And we just have to hold it differently and hold it like that. Then we can bring that to everybody that we're near as they pass. And we can remember these stories, the moments when it's us. Say, wait a minute, I remember what happened when that guru wasn't breathing and didn't have a pulse, and I remember about the constable and his son, and I remember on and on and on. These stories are very valuable for that reason. So, does anybody have any questions or comments? There's time for them. I don't want to just fly through this. We've been about 15 minutes behind all night. I wish I could remember, Sarah, but it went out of print so long ago. Maybe if we Googled, but it went out of print so long ago before computers even were. Yeah, I don't remember it. I've often wished Barry was still alive because he had an amazing memory for those things. He would remember the name of the book, but I don't. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
There are a lot of advanced meditators also who go out of their bodies. I don't know, some people here might be doing that.
Yeah.
So, you don't even have to reference past book or anything for people getting out of their bodies. I have known people who say I'm trying to get out of, I get out of here and then I'm trying to bilocate and
right.
I'm
yeah. Yeah.
Are you real? Yeah, so.
It's true that we don't have to tell just these stories about these great beings. And I think in a way that's why I tell some of the stories about myself, because I'm clearly up here not one of those people, and I will tell you all the truth. I've never left my body in that way. But I just haven't. It hasn't happened to me. I've had very deep, peaceful meditations, but I have not been outside of my body like that. But the reason to hear these stories is only because when you're eyewitness to it. So I'm not the one saying, oh yeah, I leave my body all the time, and I believe a lot of those people. I think people have these experiences, even though sometimes you look at them and you think, really? Just like what you said, really? But yeah, probably really. But when you're there and you witness it, and the body looks as dead as it can be, and then a minute later, it's this fabulous, cherubic, delightful guru dancing in front of you with all the life that he had 3 hours ago, it gets your attention when you're there and you see it. And I want everybody to know that, I think you all consider me a reliable source, so I just want to say I've seen it and been there, and I think it's helpful to hear these stories. It just gives us a sense of another dimension. Anybody else? We're going to do, let's just take a shorter time than we thought. Again, we didn't start till almost 6:15 or 6:20, and it's just followed us. Plus, we had a lot of stories tonight, which were wonderful in the first hour. But we're going to try and start on time next week at 6, and we'll stop at 7 to go and have dinner, and we'll get more back. That is not grammatical, but we'll get back into the correct flow here. What we'd like to do tonight is pass out paper, but I don't see where the paper is. We might have to check with Padmini to see. And we'd like to ask everybody just to take a couple of minutes to write something to someone, and Padmini has those papers and pencils, so Lahari will bring it. Lahari, maybe it's outside there. To write something to someone who has either passed from your life or is passing, or honestly just take a lot of room with this, even just somebody that you have something you need to say to that you haven't, or something you'd like to share from your heart. And what we're going to do then is we're just going to go out, we'll light a fire, we're going to just say a mantra a few times, and then we're going to offer what we write into the fire, knowing without a doubt that we're offering it back into God, that it's being purified, and our words, our feeling, our need in that way will be received, again, spiritually, energetically, by those who we're trying to communicate with. It does not really need to be somebody who's left the body, but it certainly could be. It could be somebody who's passing right now, or somebody you know who's ill, or who you love and haven't remembered to say that to. What we're doing is realizing the potential of crystallized thoughts as energy, and then watching it transform into another form and being taken back up into the divine. So let's just take some time to do that, and then we'll go outside.